Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Very warm welcome to this webinar being run by the TCM Group, the UK's mediation experts. And today we're focusing on something quite interesting. Why is leadership so effing hard? Now, I was wondering about the title of this presentation, and don't worry, this isn't a presentation that is full of expletives and negative language. Today we're going to be focusing on the tough times that managers face when they experience feelings, fights, frustrations, falling out, and the general F words of the modern business. So my name's David Little. I'm the CEO and the founder of the TCM Group, and I have with me today Owen Bubbers, one of our senior resolution consultants who has experience of working with organisations to help their managers and employees manage some of the tough times and perhaps transform some of our approaches, some of our organisation's approaches for managing conflict, change and challenge within those organisations. So this is me, David Little. So a little bit about myself before we get started. I'm a mediator with over 20 years experience. I've mediated in a whole array of different kind of situations within organisations. I've also worked in community disputes, I've worked in prisons, I've been working in schools. I've seen conflict, when it's got a grip on the situation, on the people, tear the relationship apart. But I've also seen the power of dialogue, the power of talking and listening with each other, sitting down in a safe space, finding a constructive outcome to our situation by discussion and by cooperation. I set up and run the TCM Group. As I've mentioned, we're leaders in conflict management and leadership development. And I've set up dispute resolution systems and mediation services in over 300 companies, including large multinationals as well as smaller ones. And I'm also the head of the trade body for mediators in the UK, the Professional Mediators Association. So this webinar is going to last around about 30 to 40 minutes. You should have in front of you a dashboard, and on the dashboard you'll see a little area where you can put questions for us. So if at any time during the presentation there's a question that you have or a comment you'd like to make, please do put that into the questions box. Owen will pick that up, and Owen will be asking me questions throughout, and he'll also be keeping an eye on any questions that you might have, anything that I say that you agree with, anything I say that you disagree with, or any particular observations or thoughts of your own in relation to leaders and how they manage the tough times. This presentation is being recorded. So if you have any colleagues or anyone who you think would be interested in it, we will distribute the link after the webinar, so you do have information to hand that you can share. There is also a poll a little bit later on in the webinar, and we'll be hearing how you're currently equipping your managers to manage the tough times. Okay, so what do we deal with as leaders? Well, many organisations focus on developing leaders and managers to help the organisation grow by hiring, recruiting, training and developing their leaders in line with the technical needs and requirements of their business. However, in the modern business and with the challenges of the modern organisation, what I'm finding increasingly when I'm challenging when I'm talking to managers and business leaders within organisations is that what they find the most difficult issue to deal with are people-based issues. People who are fighting, people who are frustrated, people who are experiencing tough emotions and communicating those in a way where they don't know how to handle those. They're not equipped to deal with those. People who are fearful of change, anxious and worried about the future of their organisation. And people who are failing to take responsibility for their actions, requiring other managers and leaders to pick up issues for them because they're not taking responsibility themselves. So when I was out recently talking to CEOs at a conference that I was at, I was asking CEOs, what is getting in the way of your business experiencing rapid growth? And what they said to me is, David, it's the people issues, it's when it gets effing tough in our organisations. So I asked them another question. I thought it was an obvious question. How equipped are you to handle these tough times? And I was staggered by the response. What they said to me is, David, no one's taught us this. We know that we're supposed to do it, but no one's told us how to do it. We know that HR professionals require us to do it, but no one's given us the tools we need to do it. So I asked them, well, what happens? And what they told me is the upshot of these problems is that the individuals involved in the workplace feel uncertain, disenchanted, stressed out, concerned, worried about their future, and they feel anxious about how the organisation is responding to the situation. The result of that, of course, for the leader is the workforce feel disengaged, there's drop in performance, productivity, we see increase in absence. I mean, the difficulties and challenges that the leaders face can become all-encompassing. In fact, David McLeod and Nita Clark recently in their Engage for Success report suggested that only 30% of our workforce feel engaged at any one moment in time. That's 70% of people within teams that leaders are required to manage feel disengaged in the workforce. Yet the managers and leaders I'm speaking to don't feel equipped. They don't know how to handle these situations. So what's getting in the way? Why are our managers struggling to deal with these F words? Well, the first question I would ask when I'm talking to an organisation is, what are the values of your organisation? Do the values of your organisation promote a leadership style that encourages dialogue, collaboration and cooperation? And if those values are clearly stated within the organisation, how do those values then, how are those values reflected in the leadership competencies against which we hire and develop our leaders? And organisations will often say to me, well, we don't have those leadership competencies in place. We hire our leaders because of their technical skills. We promote them through the ranks because they're gifted and they're experienced and loyal to our business. But we don't hire them to deliver the values of our organisation. So there's a mismatch, there's a gap between the values of the organisation and the leadership competencies that we require. So when we then dig a little deeper and we look at the leadership and management training that's available, when I'm talking to learning and development managers and directors, they tell me, well, we do have some soft skills training, David, and we do have a training course, generally for managers who've gone through a grievance process and have experienced some challenges. And I say to those learning and development leads, but is a day's soft skills training enough to equip your managers to deal with the effing tough times when these issues are the biggest issues that your leaders are facing right now? So we see a gap, therefore, between the values, the competencies and the training. And this is exacerbated further, and this is a really serious point for those of you from an HR point of view. The HR professional advises our manager, we've adopted the Ulrich framework, we're looking at HR delivering business value, we're looking at HR delivering transformational leadership within the organisation. We now need you as our leaders and our managers to undertake some of the transactional or people management issues within our organisations. We need you to deliver change within the teams to help us deliver and adopt the Ulrich model. But when those issues don't go very well, and when those issues go wrong, what we find is the HR professional then turns to a grievance procedure, a disciplinary procedure, a performance management procedure. And the message for the leader and for the individuals in their team is, yes, we need to do this. Yes, we need to talk about feelings, frustrations, and manage conflict more effectively. No one's told me how to do it. And when it goes wrong, I'm dragged through a hedge backwards because the organisation is reliant upon adversarial processes which, when it goes wrong, apply a sanction-based model to resolving the issue. It strikes fear into the heart of the modern leader. So what we actually see is leaders applying an approach to conflict resolution which doesn't align itself to the needs of the business. It doesn't align itself to the Ulrich model. It doesn't align itself to the values, and it doesn't deliver the behaviours that we need to engage our employees, to drive performance and increase productivity. And here are 5 behaviours of the modern leader that I see every day when I'm working with organisations across the UK. Okay, this isn't every leader, but these are some of the approaches that I see on a fairly regular basis. The ostrich. Let's ignore it and hope it will go away. Well, the bad news is it isn't going away. What happens is it creeps around the organisation. Every now and again we see a flashpoint, but we might put our head in the sand. We might hope it will go away. We might hope the 2 people will go out and sort it out themselves, but invariably it won't go away. They won't sort it out themselves. And for that organisation and that leadership style, it becomes almost the tension becomes a pernicious part of the fabric of the team. And I work in organisations where I walk into the office and you could cut the atmosphere with a knife. And I ask the people in that team, what's happening? What's going on? And what I hear people say is the leaders aren't addressing the issues. They're skirting around them. They're sticking their head in the sand. The second approach that I see on a regular basis is the leader who adopts the judge approach. I know what the answers. I'll solve these problems. Do as I say. Get on back to work. This is how it's going to be in my organisation, in my team. And in doing so, they in essence, they arbitrate the dispute and they treat it as though it's some form of a litigation process. The upshot of that is it might resolve the immediate problems, and it can do, and of course that's one of the outcomes, and it's a benefit. But in doing so, it disempowers the parties and it blocks and hinders innovation. Because when the leader encourages people when they're experiencing the effing tough times, brings them into a room and engages them in dialogue, the people involved will be able to find creative solutions. And by applying a judgment approach, we find actually it disempowers individuals. Another leadership approach I see is the caring, sensitive nurse approach. But that is often seen by employees as sticking a sticking plaster over the problem, not getting to the root cause of the issue. Concerned with the welfare, the needs, the emotional well-being of the individuals, but not addressing the elephant in the room. And when I walk into those teams, although it can feel more positive and it can feel that individuals' well-being is concerned with, people often tell me there are issues under the surface, David, that are not being addressed. We're putting a sticking plaster over them. There are other leaders, of course, who believe that attack is the best form of defence. Strike once, strike hard. Humiliate, punish, leave no one in any doubt who the boss is. This is how it's going to be. This is what's expected. And some leaders believe that acting as soldiers and attacking the problem head on is clear leadership. It's assertive. It's to the point. You know where you'll stand when you're in my team. We'll come to the implications of that. And another and slightly more subtle, but it's an interesting form of leadership approach I see during the effing tough times is the ventriloquist. Some managers would call asking their supervisors and junior managers to deal with the situation delegation of responsibility, empowering my managers to go and to do my bidding, to resolve my issues, to go and have the conversations while I pass you the problems, you go and resolve them. For the employees who experience the leader leading vicariously through their supervisors and managers, they describe it to me as abrogation of responsibility and failure to be accountable for the culture of the team. So the ventriloquist, the leader who applies this approach, is managing vicariously through others, but is not themselves taking responsibility for the situation. Owen.
Dave's got a good question to that.
Yeah.
Specifically looking at kind of the judge model, the soldier you talked about, what would you say for leaders who might say, well, look, we're in coming out of tough economic times, we are becoming ever more target-driven, results-oriented. It sounds very, very nice, this alternative approach, but I just have the luxury.
Yeah.
We need to see we need to get results. That's what I'm targeted to do. That's how I determine I'm successful in this. How would you come back to that CEO? Says, well, it sounds very, very nice and everything, but actually, it's a job to do. We need clarity, and I don't have a luxury of doing that.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I get asked that question every day when I'm out talking to leaders. It's a key question, and I say to those leaders, okay, let's look at the negatives of our approach, the elements of our the outcomes of our approach that aren't adding value to the business. The absence rates. We can't resolve the effing tough times watching homes under the hammer. We need our people in the organisation, but people tell me that they experience high absence because these issues aren't resolved. People talk about presenteeism, people who come into work, they do the job, they go home. There's no real engagement. I've already talked about the Engage for Success work. Only 30% of our workers are engaged. These issues, when they're not engaged in helping to resolve them, when they see leaders applying these approaches, just think, well, what's the point? I have no control over this. What's the point of engaging? And I feel that's one of the saddest things I hear when I go into an organisation. People say to me, well, what's the point? They lose hope. They feel helpless and hopeless as a result of that. Now, as we come out of recession and as managers are expected, and managers are expected to do tough work in tough times with less resources and are expected to deliver high outcomes and high targets for the organisation, tough targets and tough outcomes. And they say to me, we don't have time for this. The message that I bring to those leaders is you don't have time not to do it. And in actual fact, if the future success of your business is innovation to meet your customers' needs more effectively in the future, that innovation has to come from our workforce and from our employees. And if they feel disengaged, dissatisfied, hopeless and helpless, where's the engagement from and where's the innovation going to come from for the future success? And for those leaders who are having to manage in tough times and applying these old approaches to handling these situations, and of course it's not every manager who applies all of these, but for those who do, what will actually happen is they'll lose competitive advantages, new entrants will come into the marketplace, and quickly we will see new approaches taking over. And we can see that in across the piece in organisations, whether it's in retail, whether it's in finance, whatever the sector we might be working in. It's a tough sector, it's tough, and we have to keep an eye on our competitive advantage, and these approaches undermine competitiveness.
Thanks for that. I think one thing that just really struck me, I've been the last few weeks busy out and about working with lots of clients, public sector, private sector, delivering our training programs. And one thing that's really struck me is, the word is corrosive, I think. Don't underestimate that long term. It might not be said, it might not be explicitly stated, but in the way where I'm talking to people, to HR professionals at all levels of management, you can just feel it has that long-term impact on people, where they feel, you're right, sense of hopelessness, I can't do anything about it. I think I pick up on that quite often in the structure working.
Absolutely, and it expands across the organisation. I might be going and working with an HR team in an organisation, and they'll tell me they just feel that they're constantly dealing with the fallout of these issues, grievances, absence management, attrition, exit interviews, and managing the negative fallout. So HR can't actually get on and do the job they want to do, which is to add value to the organisation. They're constantly picking up the pieces from these issues. So it's corrosive within the teams, it's corrosive for the manager, and we haven't talked yet about the impact on our managers. And it's corrosive for the business as a whole. And I think organisations are saying they want to see a new normal, a new approach, a new way of addressing issues. And I'm working with organisations like Royal Mail Group and big businesses and smaller businesses as well, and many others, to help them find a new normal, a new approach. And what organisations are starting to say is these old approaches for dealing with difficult situations are no longer effective. And when we talk about key performance indicators and measures of success, we need to focus on other measures. We can't ignore business outcomes, profitability, wealth creation, customer service. They cannot be ignored. But we can focus on the leadership qualities that will enable you to get the best out of your employees during these tough times. Listening. Really giving our people a jolly good listening to. Now, I would say as a mediator, every good conversation starts with listening. Someone did pick up a slight flaw in this, of course, recently, and said to me, but David, if everyone's listening, is anyone talking? But I would suggest that to the leader who listens, they get an enormous amount of information. And when I'm observing the relationship or the conversation between our leaders and our employees, I actually find we don't listen as well as we should. Sitting back and taking time and hearing what people are saying and actively engaging with them, they will tell us what the issues are. So take a step back and listen. Acting with integrity, and this is about aligning your behaviours with the values of the organisation and acting in a way where people know you're acting with a level of integrity. You're being respectful, mindful, open and honest. Genuinely engaging with people as human beings. You're not applying a management line. You're being a real human being, and people will respect you for that, even if that means at times you're confused and uncertain. Do you know something? It's okay to be confused and uncertain as a leader. Somewhere along the lines, we've been taught as leaders that confusion and uncertainty is a sign of weakness. I would say that confusion and uncertainty, when we accept that we don't know the answer, is a sign of inherent and intrinsic strength for the leader. Being compassionate. This isn't about being weak. It's not about bending over and just yielding and giving in, but it's about recognizing that if we're compassionate to people, that we listen to them, we understand the challenges that they're facing, we're sensitive to those, sympathetic, empathetic to these issues, then it can be absolutely key to the long-term relationship.
I think something that struck me just following on from that is that in the course of my work where I'm going, as I said, to meet with lots of different clients and service providers, and really get to know a lot of HR professionals, some of the challenges that they face. We talk a lot, of course, about listening, about empathy, empathic work, emotional intelligence, just being able to listen and just to listen to what someone needs, what their interests are. I think when I'm sharing these ideas, they can come across as they sound almost radical.
Yeah.
Because in the kind of quote-unquote professional context, we somehow think, where does this have its place?
Yeah.
And actually, as when I'm presenting, it can sound very radical, but actually, of course, these are incredibly intuitive. So it's almost like we need to just rediscover these and actually recognize they are a key part of who we are as human beings and as professionals as well. But it's not radical, it's entirely intuitive. And actually, we recognize those things. We just need to become actually more reacquainted with it.
Absolutely right. There's a great insight. And I think, again, it's really important because I see a huge empathy deficit in our organisations as a result of the effing tough stuff that goes on for our leaders and our managers. But when I'm talking at conferences and in workshops, I'll ask those managers and leaders, what do you think drives change within your organisation? And ultimately what they'll say to me is, David, change comes when we have an understanding of the requirement and need for the change. That allows me to engage in it. And to understand it, I need to be able to put myself in the other person's shoes and see the world through their eyes. And when I'm mediating and I ask the parties in a dispute, can you imagine what it's like to be the other person? Can you imagine what it's like to see the world through the other person's eyes? They say to me, David, no, I don't know what it's like to see it through the other person's eyes. I haven't thought about it. And I just think that's a compelling argument. I haven't thought about what it's like to be the other person. So I'll say to them, what do you think it might be like to be the other person, to see it through the other person's eyes? They'll talk to me about the other person being frustrated, upset, let down, worried. And I'll talk about the connection that they have with their own feelings and their emotions. Without empathy, we can't connect. Yet empathy is seen as some sort of a progressive or wishy-washy or soft and fluffy ideal. To me, it's absolutely a central tenet of the psychological contract.
I agree entirely, and I think also what's really important to clarify is that by proactively trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, it's important to establish that that doesn't mean in any sense that you necessarily agree with what they say.
Absolutely.
You don't have to worry about, well, if I'm seen as being empathetic, that means somehow I'm justifying what someone might or might not have done. Not at all. You're not doing that at all. You're not giving anything away and not compromising yourself. But what you're trying is proactively say, what does it feel like to be in this person's position, regardless of whether I agree with it or not? It's important to clarify that because I find, of course, in my work really important there.
Absolutely right, and I think that's right. And I think the other side of the empathy part of the emotional intelligence kind of thinking is as well as the ability to be self-aware and reflective. So when a manager or a leader sends an employee an email or says to them, look, you're a waste of space, or I'm disappointed, to employ. And for those of you who have ever written an email to anyone and said to them they're disappointed, please, I would ask you, let's not use the word disappointed in our emails. It's the one thing, it's like a red rag to a bull, and it can inflame the situation beyond anything that we can ever expect. The reason is we haven't taken a moment just to think, how's the other person going to receive this message? And what is it that I'm trying to get across? And how would I receive the message if someone called me a waste of space or told me that they were disappointed with my behaviour? Being disappointed reminds us of being 4-year-olds being told off by our parents when we're disappointed that we stole a cookie from the cookie jar, biscuit from the biscuit tin. That's the level, and it takes us right back very quickly to that position. So it encourages an adult-child relationship between the leader and the employee. And what we're looking to develop through this approach here, we talk about as an adult-to-adult dialogue, where we connect with each other as equals, as human beings, rather than parent and child. So the use of language as leaders, being able to reflect on our own language and think about the impact of our behaviour on another person, actually promotes the kind of dialogue that we want as managers. And what managers and leaders often say to me is, oh, I wish they'd grow up. Or I could just, I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. This is two phrases I often hear. But what the leader is telling me, what they're really saying, I wish they'd grow up. I wish we could have an adult-to-adult conversation where they would listen to me so I could listen to them. I'm banging my head against the wall. I'm frustrated. I can't get my message across. Well, let's think about how you're getting your message across and how do you think the other person is receiving that message. So these two statements that I often hear from leaders are very clear symptoms that they're struggling to be perhaps self-aware and reflective and develop that empathetic connection. Of course, dialogue, mediation, other approaches can help. The leader, of course, is required to be a problem solver, but we often misinterpret what that means. The problem solver doesn't mean you have a problem, I solve it. And it doesn't mean you come to me with the solutions, I don't want to hear problems. It means I, as a leader, can help create the conditions where you, as an employee, as a member of my team, can find solutions to problems and continually develop solutions to the problems that you're facing on an everyday basis. My role as a leader is to create the conditions, to facilitate the problem solving, to resource that process, to guide, to challenge, critique, support, and to be available to help with the problem solving. It doesn't mean I'll solve it for you, and it doesn't mean just go away and solve it yourself. And modern problem solving is a very engaging process where the leader acts as a facilitator, which is the final of those 6 key elements of the new normal as I'm describing it.
Hearing you say that reminds me of a situation I faced literally just a couple of days ago in one of the training programs I was running, and I was working with a very, very experienced group of HR professionals, very committed, really wanting to sort of really develop their skills. And we were actually doing an assessment, and in one of these sections I was assessing this exchange, so between 2 parties in dispute, and then this HR professional who was practicing developing their skills as a mediator. And one of the things that I fed back to this person was that lots of great things, you affirmed the parties, you asked good questions, but I could feel just beneath the surface you were just kicking almost to try and reach the solution. So the questions were slightly a bit too directive, and what really struck me, I said, is that, you know what, I know you're keen to get to the solution, but to trust that actually by, as you say, David, facilitating, creating that space to let the parties try and work that out for themselves, you're actually far more likely to reach a comprehensive, can I say, deeper solution that will really work long term, that is organic, that is owned by the parties, that they will feel, yes, I've helped to reach a solution for myself. Again, the adult-to-adult conversation. Absolutely. So we just fed that back. It's all with the best of intentions, but just to be mindful of that. And it's not easy to do as well. It's not easy.
I think I'd agree. When I'm training managers and leaders and HR professionals and others to become mediators, not solving other people's problems is one of the biggest and most challenging skills that people say they face. But what's interesting is when they go back to the workplace and email me the next day or the next week and say, David, this is my analysis of the training that we've had, what they tell me is it's made the biggest single shift and change in difference to the way they manage. And I was training some police officers recently on how to handle complaints against the police. And I was training those police officers on how to respond to complainants when they're coming in and critiquing the experience they've had with the police. And we were focusing on this particular issue, working with complainants to try and find solutions with the complainant as a partnership with complainants as part of complaints handling. And I got an email about 2 days later from a police officer with over 19 years service. And he said to me, David, why was I not given these skills on the first day that I joined as a constable in this police force? This has transformed the way that I communicate with people. It's not my responsibility to solve their problems, and working with them, they know what the solution is, and we found a mutually acceptable outcome, a win-win outcome between ourselves that was good for them and it was good for us, and it's working. So when we can get to that point, it's transformative. Jackie, you've asked a question about the importance of transactional analysis, picking up on the theme of adult-to-adult conversations, and I would agree. I think it's absolutely key to modern leadership, building those adult-to-adult relationships, but also moving away from the leader as the rescuer in the drama triangle of transactional analysis, where the leader is almost sucked into a difficult situation, into one of the F words of the organisation, sort of challenging the behaviours of the kind of the perpetrator, or protecting or advocating on behalf of the victim. And that drama triangle can really influence how our managers manage and how our leaders lead, rather than focusing on the facilitative nature of leadership about bringing our parties together. So I think you're right to draw on transactional analysis, and certainly we use it in our work. Another area of theory that I'm absolutely inspired by is the notion of the transformational leadership. And there's a lot of work that's been done to think about the nature of transformational leadership. But somehow or another, it doesn't seem to be impacting upon the way that our leaders lead within the UK, within organisations that I work with. And I think transformational leadership is absolutely key to the new normal that I'm describing. The leader is in relation to engaging our employees, giving them a voice, providing a clear narrative and a clear environment for our employees to be able to engage within, rewarding success, tackling issues quickly, creating a culture of dialogue and mutual respect, focusing on interests and needs rather than strong positions. This is all part of the modern leader to engage our employees. Empowering our employees to go away and find solutions, but not in a way where we abrogate responsibility, but actually helping them, resourcing them and supporting them. And this is so important, when we experience failure, the key F word here, when we experience failure, is not throwing the book at them, helping people to learn. Now, I have two young boys, Daniel and Ethan. Daniel's 5 and Ethan's 2. And at my house, I don't throw the book at them when they make a mistake. I don't take out a disciplinary process or reach for my house's performance management process. I don't put Daniel on a PIP. I might put him on the naughty step for a few minutes, but I don't put him on a PIP. I don't take him to grievance, and I don't take him through some process, because I want him to be able to learn from his experiences in order to be able to address those himself in the future. Now that for me is about learning and developing and growing another person. Why is it that in our organisations we lose all of that and we rely instead on formal processes to address things when they go wrong?
Do you think it's about this issue to do with sort of certainty versus uncertainty? Do you think that's a worry that lots of leaders have, is if I might, in my heart of hearts, want to empower my employees to try and resolve their dispute, but if I do so, am I risk losing control for myself? Do I put my business at risk?
Right, I think that's a really good question. I think if the policy framework within which we work and therefore the culture creates certainty based on the tiny minority of people who are going to try and do our organisation ill, or who have a legitimate claim and want to go to litigation, and that's going to be less than 1% of our workforce. 99% of our employees want to sit down and resolve issues so they can get back and do the work that they need to do and deliver the kind of outcomes and performance that we need our business to do. Yeah, so what we have is we have a level of certainty that's been designed by legal professionals that protect our organisation from the worst excesses of a tiny minority of our employees, and pays no regard, no attention and no consideration to the vast majority of our employees who are hard-working, loyal, decent folk who just want to have their issues resolved. So in our quest for certainty, we've become risk-averse, we've created policies and procedures which are adversarial, and they strike fear into the heart of our people. And we need to recalibrate our whole organisation. We need to think about what kind of organisation are we? What kind of organisation do we want to be? And do we want to engage our leaders in a positive way to help them resolve issues, or do we just want to create certainty where the certainty is actually counterproductive? And I think this is a really important question that business leaders, boards and HR directors and others are grappling with right now. And unless we see change, unless we see something happen fairly quickly, we're just going to do the same old thing every day. And if we do the same old thing every day, we're going to get the same outcomes. So it's time for a change. And this is a really important message for me as a mediator, for those of you who are dealing with the effing tough stuff in your businesses, the fights, the frustration, the feelings. And it's taken from Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. And what Jung says here is the most intense conflicts, if they can be overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. And Jung goes on to say, do you know something? We need these conflicts and the conflagration, the heat, the explosion of these conflicts in order to be able to produce valuable and lasting results. So what Jung tells us is we need the effing tough stuff to build stronger, more productive relations. Let's not be scared of it. Let's engage, let's embrace it. Now what Bruce Tuckman tells us, another psychologist, is our teams are going to go through 4, maybe 5 stages. They're going to form, they're going to storm, they're going to start norming and then hopefully performing and perhaps adjourn when the job is done. So our teams are going to face conflict. They're going to go into a storming phase. So Jung tells us that conflict is inevitable, in actual fact it can make us stronger. Tuckman tells us it's going to happen anyway. So let's engage with it and let's embrace these effing tough times and work with them rather than seeing them as a threat where our policies and procedures prevent us from the worst excesses.
I think, and just following on from that, I think it's naming this, is that, it's understandable. None of us like conflict.
Yeah.
I think whether it be in our society, in our organisations, or whatever way, we are generally we don't like facing conflict. It's tough. It's difficult. But I think it's important to say that conflict is also normal. Wherever you have people, wherever you have relationships, it is entirely normal. And therefore, we shouldn't dread it. We say this is a part of part of the world, part of our relations, part of our businesses, organisations, and actually let's be proactive and saying this is an opportunity if it's handled in the right way.
Absolutely right, Owen. And this is a map that I've drawn of the modern organisation. Again, I'm working with many organisations now. Like I said, I've mentioned Royal Mail Group, many local authorities, hospitals, big banking organisations and others to help develop this type of organisational structure. So the first thing that we often look at when I'm working with an organisation is the nature of the organisation, the values, the governance, the strategy that's in place within the organisation, the systems and processes, and how are organisations ensuring that they're driving a culture of wellbeing and engagement. What's the culture of the organisation? To do this, I'll have a conversation with unions, HR professionals, business leaders, go to the board and start talking to people and gathering data about the kind of organisation you are and the kind of organisation you want to be. And increasingly what I see when I'm talking to organisations is they tell me we've just spent £25,000 on a compromise agreement, my HR director's just been in an employment tribunal for 10 days defending a case, our managers are spending more time investigating issues, but actually the outcomes at hearing is resulting in very few cases being upheld, and they describe a culture within the organisation where conflicts are being mismanaged and poorly handled. And they say, David, we don't want this. This is costing us money, it's impacting our reputation, it's damaging the well-being of our organisation. So I start off then by looking at the two contracts that exist within our organisations. And for those of you who have not heard of the psychological contract, I would suggest it's the most important contract that exists within your business now. When I go to talk to business leaders and entrepreneurs, I say to them, what's one of the most important things in your business? What do you rely on in your business? And they say, David, it's all about the relationship. The relationship I have with my people, with my suppliers and with my customers. They don't say to me, it's the strength of the contract and the power of my lawyer to be able to back me up when it goes to court. They don't say that's a strength. So why is it when we experience the tough times, is it we put all of our energy and emphasis on the written contract and court? That's not important. I strike that. It is important. It's not the most important thing. So the psychological contract is the sense and the perception of the promises that are being made when we're engaging with each other. So an employee and a manager and a leader sitting down and talking with each other in those first early days. And it's that sense from the employee of you're making certain commitments and promises to me about what life's going to be like working in this organisation. And as we know, the adage goes, I join the organisation, I leave my manager. Because the manager has failed to keep the promises that I believe they've kept, there's a breakdown in the psychological contract. I've left with no choice, I'm going to leave the organisation. And the psychological contract, and focusing on the psychological contract, is absolutely key for leaders. Being aware of what we're saying and the promises that we're making, being equipped to handle the psychological contract when it breaks down. Being aware that when I make certain commitments and promises to people, I need to keep my promises, or I need to be aware of how I'm going to adjust those promises according to certain circumstances. When people feel frustrated, angry, aggrieved, I'm able then to listen to those people. I don't become defensive in my response. I encourage people to open up and share with me their concerns. Delivering better resolutions. Organisations focusing as well about the role of mediation, internal mediators or external mediators, to help to repair the relationship, to restore the relationship if it breaks down. And only then, when we've tried everything that we can, is to bring in investigations, hearings, appeals, adjudication processes. But my experience of organisations is we move to formal too quickly. We've become so reliant on process and formality, we've lost sight of the people. And what I'm proposing here is putting the person back in the centre of the resolution process. And of course, when the employment contract breaks down, then we can think about things like early conciliation, we can talk about settlement agreements and if need be, employment tribunals. But that should be a measure of absolute last resort. And in my view, should be a sign of absolute failure on the part of every other attempt to be able to resolve it. But we've almost become reliant on these approaches. And if we look at the front page of the Evening Standard earlier this week, the Metropolitan Police's reputation was torn to shreds as a result of an employment tribunal where they failed to handle, according to the employment tribunal, allegations being brought by one of their black female police officers against that organisation. And the employment tribunal could not have been clearer. You need to go away and focus on how you resolve internal complaints. Now, my advice to the Metropolitan Police, as it would be to any organisation, is if you're revising how you handle internal complaints and grievances, focus specifically on how you get people around the table and how you resolve issues before they escalate out of hand. And that is going to be key to the successful conflict competent organisation. So this is if you like, a map of what organisations could look like. And this is what leaders can do. Be assertive. It's not exactly as you've said, Owen, which is very right. It's not about agreeing. It's not about bowing down. It's not about giving in. Be assertive. Be clear about your interests and your needs, but be empathetic and aware and appreciative that other people have their own needs and goals. Be reflective. Consider your response. Consider your tone of voice. Consider if you call someone a waste of space, they might feel that they're less valuable than some molecules of carbon dioxide and helium and oxygen. But it's going to have a real impact. It might be for you just a turn of phrase. For them, it has real impact. Create a safe space. Safety first. If we're talking at the water cooler or toe-to-toe in an office or people can hear us, I don't feel safe. I can't be open and honest. Take the time to create the conditions. Perhaps find a neutral venue. Go to Starbucks, Costa, Nero, coffee shop of your choice to try and find a space to go and talk. Take it away so everyone can feel not that level of fear or apprehension. This is really important as well, and I see this so often, particularly around performance management. We get so tied up on what isn't working, we lose sight of what is working. Positive psychology, appreciative inquiry, unconditional positive regard. These might sound like psychological processes, but they're so important. Focus on the positives. Trust the intention of the person. Believe the intention of the other person was to do good rather than do bad. Focus on the things that are working as well as the things that aren't working. Maybe say thank you and value the things that people are doing, even when mistakes and errors are being made. That will open up the conversation and create the tone for the kind of dialogue you want to have as a leader. And give and receive feedback, but don't be defensive when people tell you they're not happy with how things are going. Listen and take that as intelligence to help you develop the kind of behaviours you need to be as a leader. To do this, we need to listen, we need to listen, and we need to listen. And that's absolutely key to the role of the modern leader. And here are 3 possible outcomes. Well, you might have some outcomes for your organisation, and I would suggest we need to measure these very closely and align these to your organisation's needs and goals. A healthier workforce where people feel less stressed, less anxious, less worried. A happier workforce, more productive. We're off on our summer day out tomorrow to Thorpe Park, which is a theme park near us. We're just going to go out as a business and have a bit of fun for the day. Having fun, enjoy. I believe passionately that a fun, happier workforce is a more productive workforce. You might have your own views on that, but my experience is that when people feel happier, they feel valued, they feel that they can have a bit of fun at work, they go the extra mile. And if we talk to entrepreneurs and people who have developed high-performing businesses, what they say to us is people issues aren't my problem. I work hard to get the best out of people, and then they go the extra mile for us, that extra 25%. That's what we need from our people. And our people become more resilient. They're more able to handle the turbulence of the organisation, the changes that we require. They're able to give of their best during the tough times. They know they have a voice to be able to raise issues when they come up. They don't suppress issues. There isn't the head in the sand.
Just quickly following on from that, talk about healthier, happier, more resilient staff.
Yeah.
Perhaps one of the reasons why perhaps traditionally we haven't always focused on this, as outputs, because they're obviously much harder to quantify than the basic stats, the bottom line. For leaders in our organisation, businesses who are on the call, who say, well, that sounds great, I really want to, kind of how, just in a nutshell, I guess, how do you kind of justify it in a commercial sense that, yes, a happier workforce does have a real knock-on added value to the business of the organisation?
I would be very nervous about saying to an organisation in a didactic way that you must do this. What I would say to the organisation is what kind of values, what kind of culture, what sort of ethos do you want in your business? And I would be working with the business leaders, the HR director, the learning and development director and others to say what kind of behaviours do you need your managers to exhibit to help you be the kind of business you want to be? Customer excellence, wealth, profitability, innovation, driving success, global leadership, so on and so forth. And then what I would say to that organisation is what behaviours do you need your leaders to demonstrate and what outcomes do you need them to achieve? And if they tell me that healthier, happier, more resilient workforces are important to them, we'll then start to develop local metrics and measures that are aligned to the organisation. So for instance, as I've said earlier, we can't resolve these issues at home watching Homes Under the Hammer. 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 4 years absence is no way to handle these situations. So we should see absence rates reducing. Attrition rates should fall. The cost of employment tribunals, the cost of compromises agreements should fall. The time spent by our managers on dealing with these issues should fall, or certainly become a more productive outcome. Is it CIPD say 370 million working days are lost a year in the UK due to these issues? Well, if we could reduce that by 10%, let's measure what the real impact would be. So I'd work with the HR director, I'd work with the board, I'd work with other key stakeholders and unions in particular to focus on the local real measures of this, so it becomes meaningful to the organisation. So Karen, you've asked the question, will we get a copy of the slides? You will indeed. So thank you very much for your question. I should have mentioned that at the very beginning. We'll share these via SlideShare, but also, as I mentioned, this is being recorded as well as a webinar. So I want to mention just a few things that we're doing at TCM to help managers and leaders gain the confidence and the courage to handle challenging situations and to handle the F times within the organisation. So in May this year, we launched a program called Better Resolutions, and we're very excited about this. It's a management and leadership development program, not written by a training organisation who wants to deliver management and leadership training courses. It's written by a mediation and conflict management organisation who've seen the impact of the effing tough times in a real life setting. So we've worked with a number of key partners to develop a program to help resolve these issues. We've developed 13 core modules to help your leaders manage difficult situations. And when we're working with companies, we design these modules around their needs, and we can shape the course around themselves. So emotional intelligence and positive psychology, managing discipline and absence, managing change, core coaching skills, high performance, customer first. So a number of core modules that we would, again, design around the organisation's needs. Each module is delivered generally as a half-day or maybe a one-day module in an auditorium style or workshop style, done as one-to-one coaching, or increasingly we're working to do simulated training where we use actors to come in and help to present the core messages. Very powerful and very effective way of teaching and learning. So we work with the organisation, and if you're interested in taking some of the ideas forward that we've been sharing over the course of the webinar, then we'd be very happy to work with you to look at how we might be able to help you meet some of the leadership challenges you're facing, to help close the empathy deficit, to help develop the competencies and the behaviours that your business needs to be a globally leading company in the future. So you've asked questions throughout the session, but I wonder if anyone else has any questions. You're free to ask those now, and perhaps while we're doing that, we'll also run our poll. I'll be very interested to find out, as an organisation, based on what we've been talking about today, how much do you invest in your leaders, and do you equip your leaders to deal with the effing tough times? So we're going to run a poll now, so you should have a yes or no answer. Unfortunately, you are restricted to yes or no, so I'll be interested to hear your responses. Okay. So there's still more people voting actually. So we've had 75% turnout for our ballot. Let's hope they get the same one for the referendum up in Scotland as well. That'd be good. So this is democracy in action, I think they might call this. So 70% of you have voted. So thank you very much. So the results are in, and 38% of you are investing in your leaders and equipping them to deal with the tough times. So fantastic, and really look forward to the prospect of working with you to help develop that and underpin some of the work you're already doing. But 62% of you have stated that no, right now you're not equipping your managers and leaders to deal with these issues. So perhaps more work to be done there, and hopefully today what I've set out here is some challenges to be thinking about and to be taking on board. So any more questions? No? Okay, well, in that case, we're coming to the end of the webinar, so thank you very much for joining us today. We always enjoy doing these, so it's great to have you here. I think in conclusion, leaders and managers are required to manage more complex issues. That HR and employee relations do expect managers to be part of the resolution process, so it's time to give them the skills to equip them to do that. Early or informal resolution is always going to be the most effective route to resolution, nipping issues in the bud and spotting problems early. Give people a jolly good listening to. They will love it. And it just makes all the difference. Seek consensus-based outcomes, win-win outcomes based on interests and needs, not the strength of our relative positions. And finally, don't let the F words get in the way of being an effective leader in your organisation. So I'm David Liddell and Owen Bubbers here with me. Thank you so much for joining us today, and hope that you enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be on some scary roller coasters at Thorpe Park tomorrow, so we'll perhaps get some photos of our fear, our F words, as we're going down the roller coasters. But for now, thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to the prospect of working with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.